Hello and welcome to another coding walkthrough. Although this time we're going to be walking through mostly a blog post that I've written rather than the code as such. I do have the code standing by, so we might jump into looking at that, or we might not. We might just stay on this page. This was the source of what will become a blog post to go with this video, and it actually describes in quite considerable detail all the things I'm going to show. So what I'm going to do instead, I'll partly read from this page, but I'll actually largely just describe and point out bits in a way that might be easier for some people than to just read through what I've written. So what's this all about? Well, as is always the case with these videos I'm making, I'm trying to point out things that are ordinary that you have to do when you're writing a lot of program. You will find there are times when you have headed down a certain path and you need to make changes, and you've got a lot of those to make. So you need to have some sort of idea about how to go about doing something thoroughly, and that's what we're going to explore here. The example, once again, is from my program folder tree, and it basically is a real example of where I'm at with the program and a change that I need to make. So let's actually look at the code for a second, and we'll come back to the walkthrough as to why am I doing changes at all. So the main reason for this is that here in the program where we're dealing with all of the graphic user interface or GUI controls, I've made a change to how one of those controls works, and it's taken a combination of changing how the control works and how it gets fed by bits of information. So I've had to experiment and find how I was going to do something. That experiment has now worked, so I actually know how I'm going to do things, and there's some new code that I'll point to that's going to be used by the changes. But I actually now have to go through all of the code where I define the graphic interface for this program and make that same change all the way through. So the question is, how do you go about doing that? And just to make things a little bit simpler in a way, we're going to assume, as is actually how I run this program, that I don't have a branch in Git. I haven't gone, there's the great program as it's working, and now I'm going to create a new branch in Git and do all of the changes in the branch. I'm actually going to pretend that I'm making the changes to the live program all the way through. That as I go making the change, I want to be able to almost at any point walk away and the program still works, even though I'm only partway through making the changes. So again, when you're dealing with a program on a larger scale, and look, this is only a medium scale program, it's not a small exercise anymore, but because it will take you time to work through, you do need to have some kind of method to your madness of making the changes. Okay, so let's look at what's really changed. Actually, for starters, let's run the program and we can look at what graphic element is going to be changing here. So let's run it. Okay, that wasn't expected. Better stop. Okay, let's try running the program and have a look at what the control is that I want to be changing. So here's folder tree running, and the place where we're going to see the change is in this folder tree interface, and it's actually this deletion mode combo box down here at the bottom. Actually, this same combo box does occur in another part of the program, but for the moment we'll just look at this part here. So when we go back into the code, we'll want to look at the constructions for all of this graphic user interface. So the general structure here for folder tree is it's a single window application. Inside that window, apart from the close box at the top and a couple of labels, we've got a big tabbed interface here, and then inside the second tab you've got sort of a multiple section of display with in particular the combo box we're interested in down at the bottom here. So that's going to be fairly well down in the sequence of describing what's in this tab in the code. So let's have a look at how the code actually looks for that. So here we are actually inside exactly where that combo box is here. The combo box itself is sitting inside a frame. So the way that Tkinter works is that you define areas, you might place objects, and then inside the objects you might also place areas. The areas are called frames. So the frame where this particular combo box lives is inside here. It's on tab 01 as opposed to tab 00, which is the first one. It's actually frame number 11 in here. The frame gets created. You can see from the highlight that the frame is then quoted by the various controls that live on that frame. And we've got check buttons there, another check button, a label, and come down a bit and we finally get to the combo box here. So here is where the combo box is being defined. And now what we have here at the moment is how I'm going about making these changes. I've got a new replacement combo box with new replacement values to fill it with, and to control how I'm implementing that, I've actually created a temporary variable here. So the name T underscore for temporary, then basically saying where it is on tab 01, saying that it's a combo box, the old style, and it's for the deletion mode, and I'm just setting this to false. So I'm creating a variable, setting it to false just as a flag. I'm only going to use that flag once right here, saying if that flag is false, then show me the old way of doing the control. So this code is, if I look back to the previous editions of the program, this is what the code was, the only code that was there. And this is the replacement code down here in the extra 2 lines after the else. And it means I can just turn between those two by changing the false here to true and check that both of the methods actually work. So certainly the code that's being replaced is this, and the new code is here. Now for the purpose of the exercise here, you don't really need to know much about this, but I will show you. So that combo box control reference here is a Tkinter one. It just comes with Tkinter. So from just importing the Tkinter object, and that's the alias that the imported module was given there, .combobox, that creates us a combo box control. It's allied with having a string variable so that we can see what's in the combo box that was set there, and that gets referred to over here on the right hand side. Probably can't see it too well over here, the name of that variable, so that we can pick up the value. So that's how the combo box works in classic Tkinter. And then we actually just set the value of the combo box. We set it the value of the string variable that we assign to being the text variable for the combo box. So this all gets a little bit fiddly, and that's part of why I wanted to replace it. To be honest, the replacement's got more about what the nature of the variable is rather than the way I have to go setting it. It's just that while I was creating the replacement, I made it so that it would work in a simpler way. So the reason the new one works is I've got a new type of object that I've created called pair tuple combo box, and the thing to look at here is that if we go searching for that, and particularly if we go upwards, we will find a class, this is higher in the same file, where I've defined what a pair tuple combo box is, because it's something that I wanted to do, and it took a bit of mucking about and research to do it, which is now all done. Frankly, for what we're looking at here, we don't need to know what's in all of this stuff here, just to say that it works and it provides the necessary functions. It does call on the existing combo box, so we do kind of find that in there because it's what this new class is based on. So this first line up here, defining the new class, creates a new class called pair tuple combo box, and it's based on the old combo box. So really the code in here is saying be a combo box, but work in these slightly different ways to the standard one. So that's one half of this. The other half is over in another module called commentary here, and what I originally had was I was using an enumeration type for the setting that the combo box would handle, but the combo box can't handle an enumeration type. It has to have a text value, so I had to have all of these other functions which have now been commented out here to allow that to work. And I've replaced that by a new type of support for the enumeration that also has a little bit of complexity to it. That's all of this code. Again, for what we're looking at the moment, we don't need to know the detail of that, but these are the two bits that I had to experiment and work out how I was going to do before I would then go making the changes. So let's go back to where we were here. Let's go jump into where we're using that. So the key thing here about what I want to do is I want to work through all the different combo boxes and change them over from using the original combo box style here to using the new pair tuple combo box, which is fine, except that that also has to be linked to having a suitable object type to feed into the combo box. So this parameter being passed here is new. It's a new type of thing. It means that that function there has to be back in commentary defined along with the deletion mode enumeration type. So that's a change, as is this second parameter here, the default tuple value for the combo box. So that's new. So there's a pair of changes to be made here. Now the thing that's probably a little bit surprising is, but why in that case have I bothered with this combo here? The setting a value to false and then just going, well, if it's this or that. As I said before, it's just so that I can have both sets of code in place, leave the existing one running. If I had that set to true, then we'd still be using the old functionality. And then when I'm testing, I can just come along and change the false to true or the other way around. Test that it works. When it's finally working fine, frankly, I can then go and delete these two lines. No, not those ones. Can delete these lines here, delete my flag, and just have those two lines instead. So I kind of go through and do that all as a sequence. Now, part of the reason for being fussy like this is that I really want to be sure that this new combo box and method of having an enumeration to support it is going to work for all of the combo boxes I've got. And there are a few around in the program. So I'm going to want to have to do something like this for each of them. And it's really only after I've done all of them that I'm going to be confident that the new style combo box defined as a class and the new features in the enumeration defined off in the commentary module are all going to work fine. And at the end of all of that, then I will come back and I'll delete these flags and delete the old codes throughout the whole thing. I don't want to just delete as I go, because I may need a fallback of just going back to the old method, and I may have to completely rethink my new combo box class and find some other solution. It's that kind of problem that I want to not get myself into a real problem with. Frankly, leaving the code sitting around doesn't bother me. I know this bothers some programmers. There are programmers who think, no, and particularly you've got your Git history, so just delete the old code. I understand that. I've worked in an organization as well. I know it's like with multiple people. They're right in a sense that no one will get around to deleting the old code. Trust me, I spent a lot of my life in mainly SQL scripting, where I see a lot of old crud code that's sitting around, actually doesn't do anything anymore, but it's still sitting there and it just wastes everybody's time. Yes, that's true, but on the other hand, when you're your own programmer and you know your task is to get from A to Z, and that after doing Z you will go and wipe the slate clean, you can trust yourself, really, and particularly if it's not too huge an issue. Let's just pop back into the program running and get a feel for how many of these there are to do, just so you've got an idea of the scope of what I'm looking at here. So it's not that many in some respects. There's the one here that's there for the deletion mode. Congruent tree, that's got a combo box, but it's not for the same thing. Actually, it's got another one here, and actually those two will be going. Those will get tied up into how this one works, so that's not so bad. That one, there's quite a few here. There's one there, one here, one here. And in fact, this one is the same purpose as the one we just looked at. Clonetry, alright, well that's got one. Symmetry, I don't think this one, no, that one doesn't have any at all. And then we're off into the settings. I'm not sure if there are any combo boxes in the settings. There will be that one. Couple here for the encoding types. That's probably it. Logging is just those. So there we go, that's all. These last ones are just some output windows. So look, it's not huge. It's enough that I wanted to be organised about doing it. It's also enough to make an example of, as it happens. Given there's not that many, you might think I'm a bit overboard for wanting to have a clear method for doing it. Look, this is the thing. When you spend over time programming, you will acquire ways that if you're not going to do something as a once or twice or three times thing, if you're not sure how many you're going to do, then you want to have an organised approach to doing that. Okay, so I'm trying to remember how many of these I've actually already put in place here. Might be that if I go searching for if t, let's jump to the top. Alright, so I'm going to jump around. Actually, we'll look at this exact one, because even though we saw it there in the point where the combo box is defined, there's actually a few other things that go along with that combo box. There's putting the value out of it. So in fact, and so this will look a bit strange. I have used the exact same name of variable here throughout the places where I've done this, but in fact each of them is, in terms of how the program runs, as an independent instance. So for example, here in this part of the code, this is the same variable. Actually, let's just put that into the search and just jump around. Just to escape, we'll just do Control G to jump to the next one. There's another, well that's the same one. Then there's one here, setting it to false, testing whether it is or not, doing one of the two things. Another one down here, another one there, and actually here's one where we create the combo box, which funnily enough the way the code works here is the last reference. We actually get all of the references of what we'll do with it before we get the reference of how it's created, and then we're back around the loop. So there's a few there, and yes, I use the exact same variable name, even though in each case we're going to immediately overwrite it. And so yes, to some extent that means that when I want to do the test of changing, have I got them all right for this particular control, I will need to do a search replace on that equals false. Let's just do this. So for example, I would go to change that equals false to that equals true, and that's how I would jump around and change each of them. It's just a little bit handy to have them all independent in case I do want to test one on its own, such as while I'm actually making the change. But it's also handy because I don't have to remember where it was I put the one definition of this being true or false, or have to worry about in what scope inside Python here I've done that. So that's a mental laziness on me. This is all temporary code, so it's not like I'm making a decision here that's going to affect things down in the long run. I'm really going to work through doing all of these and then testing them. So let's jump back to this. Let's actually have a look through, and just, even though I wanted to show you just this general technique of the if setting a value and then using it for true or false to decide which bit of code to do, I'm going to talk it as if you're interested in what the detail is. Like really you're not, but you know, it's a good pretense. So we have a situation here where we are actually reading from the saved settings in the program and making sure the combo box has that setting as its default, so that you can go into the settings and create, load in your saved settings, in which case you want to set all the different combo boxes throughout the interface, including this one, and this is where that would happen. So is that right, or I got this wrong way around? No, actually this is the other way around. This is for when we go saving the settings, it goes and looks at all the combo boxes and gets their values. So for this particular one, where we've got that we're doing it by the new way versus the old way. The new way here is get selected key, which is a feature I wrote into the new object, like that's not a standard Tkinter thing. Whereas the one here was actually using the standard .get from the combo box, but because that delivered just the text value, I had to convert that into my enumeration by a function that I'd written back where I have my enumerations. So that's how that was going. So again, there's a real change going on here about how this works, even though it's just the same operation that we want to do. Let's jump to the next one. Right, this one is actually the way I said the first time, where we've got the saved values that we've read in from a JSON file. They're sitting in the memory variables, but we actually want to go and make sure those apply to the combo box in the the graphic interface. So that's what that's doing here. Here's the old method of taking the Combobox value, Combobox object, doing the .set command of it, and we have to get the string version of my enumeration to put in there. I've replaced that by actually passing in the key. That does assume I've got the evaluation, the enumeration key in this case. So there's some other changes going to have to happen around the settings, but that's not the GUI's issue here. Let's jump to the next one. This one is actually just a spot where when we go to run the operation that this part of folder tree is set to do, that we can show to the status page what we're processing it in what mode. So we need to get a value of a string to say, hey, you're running in this mode or this other mode, and we have to get that from the combo box. So strangely, this is actually where the old method was easier, because we were getting from the combo control, getting its current value, which is actually just a text, and therefore we could just show that text. That was quite easy. In fact, when I was rewriting this, I actually originally just had that .get there was actually sitting where this temporary prunitory mode show variable is now. That was just there. So in order to make this new swappable one work, I actually had to go and create a temporary variable to hold that string, so I could then put it in the output. That doesn't look very much of like any gain for the old method. It is for the new method, because it lets me pull out the function that gets the string from the selected key value of the combo box. So that's get selected key is a new feature I wrote into my new combo box, and then it's pulling up actually a new function for getting the string from the enumeration. Let's jump to the next one. What's that one doing here? Even I'm not sure what this one is. Checking for clashes. This is, oh okay, we're doing a Boolean check to see whether, depending on how we're going to run, whether that makes sense for that deletion mode. Actually, I think the test here is just that you actually have selected a deletion mode, that you didn't just leave that blank, just in case it was blank, even though I think now in the program it sets it to a default value, so it doesn't start out blank. So, you know, here I am going through making it so that I've got my if-else. When I was doing this, I had to be careful not to go making changes that, yes, they were related, but were not just about the changeover. And actually, this is a perfect example here. I could well have been tempted to go, oh, well, hang on, the way that I'm now doing this program means that there shouldn't ever be a blank value. That's not very obvious. It actually comes from the fact that the new combo box style doesn't let you just enter any old text. It has to have one of the preset values. It gets set when it gets created, or it gets changed again when the defaults get loaded from settings. So it can't ever be empty. So in fact, this test here for is it empty is actually a bit not necessary anymore. But while I'm in the middle of making my switchable changes here, it's not a good idea to go heading off into, oh, well, should I rewrite that while I'm doing that? The answer is no. Generally, I know there's lots of other advice saying, you know, when you visit a bit of code, you should, if an idea comes to change it, go ahead and change it. Sure, but the issue here is I wanted to be consistent. I needed to visit all the places where I was doing this combo box and making sure they're all covered by this same regime of being able to switch whether we're doing the old way or doing the new way. So that's that one. We've got another one here. I think this is another one where we're just going to get the value so that we can display it. Really? Is that right? No, not sure. We were getting the value there. Oh, okay, here we are getting the actual enumeration value, which in the previous version, the combo box with the get here would deliver me a text, not the enumeration. I actually had to then call my own function for getting the enumeration that had that particular string. Here, actually, I just go and get the selected enumeration from the combo box, because I've got a new function that delivers the enumeration. And the purpose here is we're about to run the operation by calling another function to do that, and it needs to be passed this value here, the enumerated mode that's to operate with. This is actually the real setting that the combo box is really about. So in this case, the new method is slightly easier, and it's a single fetch, and I'm not here in the middle of the fetch having to do any conversion. So that one's an improvement. And here we are down to where the combo box gets created. So that's the loop around. This is, I mean, needless to say, this is actually working, this switchable arrangement here. And so for this particular one, I could now go through and delete the old code and replace it with the new. As I said earlier, I don't actually think that's wise. I think with all the different combo box, even though I think I've covered what I need in the new class method, really it'll be when I've gone through all the combo boxes and done the equivalent changes, because each has their own enumeration value that's behind them. There's going to be code to go and change into the commentary. Thankfully the combo box is a class, so that won't need to be changed, but the commentary ones will all have to be subtly changed. Actually, let's have a look at what I did change there to get an idea of how much we're talking about. So at the moment, I think that part has stayed the same. I think these parts have stayed the same. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure now. These parts are becoming obsolete, so I've actually commented them out as a bit of a test there. Then there's this new bit of code here and a couple of new calls there, which are actually kind of just basically giving neater names to what can be done directly with the internal structure. Now it means that all for the other combo boxes I'm going to have to make similar changes. So we come down here, here is the next one, which is about an group method. We can kind of see that as an enumeration it's got a whole set of values. It's got these sets of functions that I'd written originally, in that case plus some extra bits. But it means that the new method for having I'm doing these enumerations is going to be echoed from the one I've done for the deletion mode, so that it's available here before I then go off and start making the changes back in folder tree for where its combo box is, in which case I'll be doing a similar thing of creating a new control variable and doing an if and then else as I set up the new and the old code for it. Alright, that's it in a nutshell. Actually, as it turned out, I didn't end up just reading through this blog page. This will, when it goes out, will basically talk through the exact details of what we've just been discussing. Actually, in a way, I'm kind of glad, because I was afraid I might just be reading this, which would be a bit dull if you were just watching me read things off the screen, rather than me leap into my own way of describing what I was doing. But this really does show in detail, in fact even in more detailed steps than I covered here in the video, for writing those clauses and doing the controls. Alright, once again, this is a boring video because it's about a boring part of what coding is like. Again, the idea I have for these is to show you in situ of real code where I'm making a real change, where normally we don't ever write out how we do these little things, really, because this is a small thing in a sense, and it's dull. Once you've set up, I mean, the fun bit was, if you like, creating the new class and working out how I was going to do the new enumeration. Look, I could do a video about that, but frankly it's just more interesting code and technique. The stuff that you will go looking on Stack Overflow to find an idea from someone, or you'll just make up yourself from scratch. You don't need me to be in videos showing you that stuff, because it'll be just what I did for this particular program. You will be inventing your own things and finding your own things. The things that won't change though are, now I have to make that change consistent throughout my program. How do I go about doing that in a way that I don't go insane, and B, that I actually get thoroughly done? And I might say being thorough is, I think, actually even more important in a language as poor at letting you have certainty about your code as is Python. Look, I'm obviously enjoying writing in Python, which is why I'm doing it, but I don't think it's a great language to be programming in. It actually requires a lot of diligence from you as the programmer, that in other languages, frankly, the compiler will pick up as an error if you do the wrong thing. But you know, we pick our tools and we work with what we have to hand. In this case it's Python. That means, I think, needing to be consistent in how you approach making your changes. Even though you'll throw them all away and they'll just end up in the Git history that you'll probably never go back to, that's fine. The end goal is having a better program, really, in the most clear way of getting there, so that in fact you do have less that's hardly done, that's a control that you overlooked, that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble, so I'll stop there.